All right. So I am Christina Haganey with Valor Payroll Solutions, and we help small businesses make payroll easy. And I'm super excited today because we actually have someone in the realm of payroll, but who deals with the consequences of people not following the rules, which we're always talking about the rules, but now we get to hear about some of the real life implications when you don't. So I will turn it over to you, Miss Lisa, and let you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do.
All right. Thank you, Christina. My name is Lisa Blue. I am the owner of Ezra Tax Resolution Specialist. I specialize in comprehensive representation before the IRS. So I am a licensed enrolled agent. I'm licensed by the IRS, United States Treasury, to do just that at all administrative levels within the IRS. So, yes, I help individuals and small businesses that get into uh, tax debt, including employment tax returns, which, that's what's relevant in our conversation today. So I do help people resolve those. Yeah, because they can really become a snowball, right?
Oh, yeah.
And probably 98% of the clients that I work with, they just ran into some hardship, right? Something happened out of their control with every good intention. They skip that federal tax deposit because they've got to pay their rent, or the or the landlord's going to come and close the business,
Right.
and their intention is just to make up that payment, but then maybe another thing happens. Maybe they don't get paid by a client or something, and then there's this snowball
Yeah.
effect that takes place, and before they know it, it's completely out of control, and they are freaking out. So, they come to me freaking out or scared,
Right.
nervous, totally stressed out. They think the IRS is going to swoop in and take their business, and it doesn't really work that way. The IRS does not want to do that. Um, so, so that's where I step in.
Right.
I mean, one thing I would highly recommend, if you are getting those IRS notices, don't wait. The penalties are can be excruciating.
Yeah.
They can be very high, and they add up very quickly, and then daily compounded interest on top of that, and it just builds really quickly. So don't wait. I can step in. There's a variety of options to resolve debt depending on your situation. I mean, if you're really in a hardship type situation, there is an offer in compromise, which is where the IRS will literally settle for pennies on the dollar.
Mm.
Um, um, And then there's installment agreements, there's penalty abatement. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when you have unpaid payroll taxes, there is something called a trust fund recovery penalty that can happen. So this is one time where the corporate veil can be pierced in the
Yes.
sense that, yes, that you can become personally liable for those taxes. Because when the withholdings take place, right, it's the employer's responsibility to pay the federal tax, half the Social Security, half the Medicare, in on behalf of the employee.
Right.
And when they don't do that, the IRS takes that very seriously.
Yeah.
Um, it's a serious offense, and so they will actually assess that against the owner or responsible person, right?
Yeah.
The responsible person who willfully did not pay those taxes, right? Willful in the sense, not that they were trying to defraud the government, but rather
They
that
knew they had to pay it.
they knew that liability was there.
Yeah.
They had a responsibility to pay it, and they purposely decided to pay other debts or expenses instead. So that's what they consider willful. So,
Yeah. And you've touched on a lot of things that we talk about, one that corporate veil, that LLC protection. This is the one time, like you said, where if you don't make your federal payroll tax payments, they can come after you as the business owner personally, and people don't always understand that. And then also, when it comes to like penalties and interest, if you don't pay the state your unemployment tax, for example, you might get a small percent assessed or a $50 like flat fee. But like you said, with the IRS, this is money you've withheld from the employee's checks. And that's really the part that they care about more so than the employer's piece. Of course, it all goes together, but that's why it's so steep when they don't pay it, because you've now basically robbed your employees. You've withheld it from their check. You
exactly.
didn't give it to them, but you also didn't get it to where it was supposed to go. And so, we talk about these exact things all the time, but you know, in my experience, and you are probably more the expert than me, with these like 941 notices, for example, I have helped people with these, and they're sending me like this year, I helped someone for 2022. So with the IRS, it seems like it takes a couple of years for this to really come to fruition. So they think they're okay, like they didn't do the thing and I didn't hear anything about it. And then it blows up 3 years later. Now you might have switched payroll companies. The person doing payroll might not be there. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, in your experience, is that the same kind of timeline that you see, like several years before these kind of come to light?
It, it can, yeah, yeah. The IRS has a certain amount of time, I don't know that off the top of my head, to actually assess the trust fund recovery penalty.
Uh-huh.
Um, so there is like a deadline for
Okay.
that. But yes, the IRS, they're behind.
Yeah.
They take some time to catch up. Um, if you skipped those payments, um, they're probably going to catch up to you,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's sometime later. So one thing that can be done though that can be helpful if you know that you've skipped those payments and you know that a liability is hanging out there and you haven't yet gotten into a resolution with the IRS, what you would want to do is make payments towards that trust fund portion,
Okay.
but you will have to specifically designate that on the payments because otherwise the IRS will apply any payments in their best interest, of course, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, so to get that trust fund recovery, the trust fund portion paid first, you do have to designate that, and a lot of people don't know that. So
Yeah.
that's
Uh,
something that can be helpful.
and then I know I have been able to get like a penalty abatement as like a one-time courtesy for, various things. A new client comes to us, they've got some outstanding thing, whatever. But I don't know like the law around that. So is that true that a business kind of gets a one-time penalty abatement? Like they should save it
Yes.
in their back pocket for like
A good one, yeah,
emergencies?
a good
Yeah.
size one. They
Yeah.
really, yes. And what the IRS it's called a first time penalty abatement. And what the IRS looks like is they look at the 3 years prior to
Okay.
the quarter that you're trying to have abated. So if you have timely filed and paid for the 3 years prior,
Oh.
then they will give you a first time penalty abatement with no questions asked. And they'll basically do that like every 4 years because they only look back 3 years, really.
Okay, I did not know
So
that.
but in addition to that, if you've already used that up, there's also penalty abatements based on reasonable cause.
Uh-huh.
So, reasonable cause can be a variety of things, a death in the family, unable to obtain records. Um, I've had a client that basically their records were being held hostage by an ex bookkeeper.
Ooh.
They weren't able to get a hold of those. So we're able to get a penalty abatement based on that. I had another client who was using an unnamed software, payroll
Oh,
software
okay. I'm like,
that that an unnamed payroll software that had told them, like they received the confirmation that the federal tax deposit had been made, and the IRS never received it, and they were actually able to show that through emails that they got with confirmation. So we were able to abate some pretty substantial penalties
oh, wow.
because of that. So yes, so reasonable cause is an option as well.
Okay, and that's really interesting to me because another thing people don't realize when, when you're choosing your payroll provider system, platform, whatever you want to enter there, because, there's a variety of things you can use. Unless you're working with a PEO, you as the employer are completely liable. Now, of course,
100%.
if that payroll company, there's a big case, I think in 2019, where they actually stole clients' tax money and there was a whole thing. And, of course, that played out a little differently. But people don't understand. Like when we set a new client up, they get an EFTPS PIN and they're like, what do I do with this? And I was like, well, you should really set up your account. Like, of course, we know we're going to do what we're supposed to do, but it doesn't hurt to have visibility into your account to see if something's going on. And so often people assume that by using a whatever, especially like Gusto, QuickBooks, whatever, that if something goes wrong, it's like, oh, well, it's their fault. But at the end of the day, it's not. I mean, I don't know,
You're
maybe,
responsible. The owner
yeah,
is responsible. Mhm.
small
Yeah.
business owners,
That's why it's great having people like you take care of their payroll taxes.
yeah,
And another thing is, I mean, if somebody does fall upon a hardship and they want to submit like an offer in compromise, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to get compliant.
yeah,
So, which is another, which is where you also come into play, to help them get compliant with filing and and their current federal tax deposits. So,
yeah.
yes, and then you're overseeing everything. I mean, that's got to be. There's a lot to that, to have that off your shoulders and not having to be concerned with that. So many people, yes, they're like, oh, we'll do it ourselves. It's simple. It's
Haha.
really not. There's a lot of laws and there's a lot of rules involved, right?
Yes.
Right? Yes. And, oh, I can handle this. Well, can you though? And a payroll, somebody like you, it it's worth every dime.
Yeah.
It is worth every dime not to get yourself in a situation
Because
with the
once they have to come
IRS.
to you, it gets a lot more expensive.
Yeah,
And then at that
exactly.
point, they're paying penalties to the
Exactly.
IRS too. And see, this
Right.
is why I was so excited to talk to you because it's like, of course, there's other stuff in payroll, employee versus contractor, and all these different things that people are like, yeah, yeah, but whatever. But with the taxes and the IRS especially, it's like it's hard to explain to people that just because you have a system that's really easy for you to input hours, that has no bearing on how compliant you are when it comes to all these payroll pieces, including taxes. And I've had
Right.
people come ask me because I do a lot of freelance projects and they're like, "Well, I thought they were paying this tax, but they're not." And they didn't do their part to set it up or to give access or to sign a POA or whatever the case is. And it's like nothing in payroll is as easy as all of the marketing for national payroll providers makes it seem because there's so much behind the scenes. And I know for us, like our clients get tax notices from time to time. It doesn't mean we did something wrong necessarily, but you send the file, the state didn't get it, or you send the payment, they applied it
Right.
the
Right.
wrong way, or whatever. I mean, things just happen. And we like day one, if we get a notice, we're going and figuring out what that is. And, if
Right.
it's the IRS, we're in trouble because it's going to be a year, is the way I look at it. Because, no, I mean, you can call and wait on hold and then relay the information and then wait for the letter to come. You can write a letter and wait for the response, but there's just such a delay. So, do you
There
see,
is.
um, or do you know if there's going to be more like electronic capabilities as
Oh
we
boy.
progress
Yeah.
in the
They've
world?
been
Like,
yeah, that's been talked about for a long time. I do. I do believe now that AI is here
Yeah.
that there's going to be progress.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I talked to an IRS agent one time, and he informed me that they were still on the DOS program. Um,
Green screen?
And they, yes, and they were working with one screen, so they're literally shutting one down to pull up one other one. They're very far behind in the times.
Yeah.
Yes, so hopefully AI is going to help with that, and I believe it's going to.
Well, we're ready, man. And
Yes.
I want to give you the opportunity too to talk about kind of, what types of things do clients come for you for? Like, of course, with the IRS payroll tax stuff, there's a whole slew of notices that comes out, and at what point does it make sense to get in contact with you to say, "Hey, can you help me?" versus when is it safe for a client to call me and ask for help or try and get it fixed on their own. Like where is it that you really can step in and help someone where they couldn't do it as well on their own or have as good of an outcome on their own?
Um, Man, I believe 99% of the time people do not they don't know the rules with the IRS,
Yeah.
right? If they've tried to handle it themselves and they're getting nowhere, call me before too much time goes by, right? So there's several notices that happen, but then there's a final notice of intent to levy that happens that actually
Okay.
has a hard deadline on it, and if that's missed, that can be bad, and that's when bank levies and wage levies and things like that occur
Yeah.
or liens on business assets or that kind of thing. So if it's not something simple like, oh, they're right, I failed to make that federal tax deposit, and you just make it and everything's fine,
Yeah.
that's one thing. But if you see that you have started snowballing and it is starting to get away with you from you, I would call.
Yeah. And
Call
so
and ask
then
for help.
you step in and kind of figure out what happened, what the error is, and then
Right.
depending on the situation, we'll work with them and, as the go between the IRS and the employee or not employee, employer, right?
Yep.
To, what's the like we talked about abatement or paying into the trust fund or, you have some different remedies for these types of things. And then your ultimate outcome is to what? Just get them completely paid up or get them on a payment plan? Like, what does that look like when someone has come to you for help and you're like, okay, my job here is done?
So yes, so the first thing we do is we will request a financial statement from them so that we can see a picture of their financial condition,
Okay.
and then we can determine next steps. So if they're really going through a hardship, like I said, there is offer and compromise available. Although the IRS will want to look at assessing the trust fund recovery penalty against them as individuals before an offer in compromise
Mm.
can be submitted for a business. So oftentimes it becomes like a dual representation. Now I'm not
Oh,
only representing the business, but I'm representing the individual as well. And we can
okay.
simultaneously, submit offers in compromise if the circumstances warrant that, right?
Yeah.
Other situations are, yes, we need to get into a payment agreement, but maybe they can't afford a full pay installment agreement. If we can prove that, the IRS will take a smaller payment, and that's called a
Okay.
part pay installment agreement. And then we've got penalty abatements. If they're not, eligible for an offer in compromise, penalties can be large
Right.
portion of the liability. So if they, fall in the criteria and they are eligible based on reasonable cause, that can drop the overall liability, substantially. And
Yeah.
so, and then they can get into a payment agreement that they can actually afford,
Okay.
where, prior to the penalties being abated, maybe they couldn't. So we look at the whole picture and to determine what the best course is going to be.
Okay.
Also, with employment taxes, the the they are actually the most aggressively pursued tax liabilities, right? Where the threshold for an individual that has liabilities is much higher
Oh,
before a revenue officer gets assigned. With employment tax liabilities, it's much lower, where an individual could owe hundreds of thousands and not be, and a revenue officer is not assigned, where employment tax liabilities is only maybe like $25,000 that's owed, and a revenue
interesting.
officer will be assigned. Revenue officer has much broader authority to aggressively, pursue. And so we don't want that to happen. We'd like
Yeah.
to avoid that if possible. Yeah.
Oh man. I was just I can't remember the exact number, but a vast majority of the IRS's annual budget is collected through 941 payments. And so, not only are we talking about money withheld from employees, so it's not yours, you got to give it to where it goes. But then
Right.
also, this is the IRS's bread and butter. And so, if you think they're not going to come after you, if they're not going to pay attention if you're
Yeah.
not paying your taxes, uh, they are. I mean, you might get away with classifying your contractors or your employees as contractors, but you won't get away from the IRS. Uh,
Right. You don't even want to try.
yeah. And then one more quick
Yeah.
thought. I know
Sure.
that I have seen people that they don't have the money to pay it, so they don't file the
I
941.
was going to mention that. Yes,
Just
that's
think about
another
that.
boo-boo,
Yeah.
right? That is definitely, even if you don't have the funds to pay, absolutely file on time. The filing penalty, the failure to file penalty can be up to 25% of the taxes.
Yeah.
And so to avoid that altogether, just file in time and then we'll deal with the liabilities.
Yes, it's funny because people just think, oh, well, I can't pay it. I'm not going to file it. And it's like,
Right.
well, now they think that you're trying to say you don't owe them anything, and they're not
Right.
having that. Um,
Right.
so it's just funny, the
And and a revenue officer will be assigned even if there's not a liability. If it comes to the IRS's attention that a company is supposed to be filing employment tax returns and they have not been, a revenue
yeah.
officer can also be assigned for that.
And people don't realize too, when you do the W-2s, right? That goes to somewhere else, Social Security Administration. But
Mhm.
ultimately, they're going to compare the records and see if all of the data on your W-2s matches the cumulative data of your 941s for that year.
Right.
And that case that I was working on this year, that's how it came to fruition that their 941s didn't match their W-2s, and we had to figure out why and so on and so forth. So, it's gonna get caught. Like obviously our message is do it right.
Right.
And if you don't know how to do it right, work with a professional. And if you don't work with a
Yes.
professional, then you're going to be working with another professional like you. So at the end of the day,
Yes.
just save
Uh,
yourself the trouble. Um,
right. Exactly.
but it is good for people to know that, people like you exist and are there to help. And I know you do a lot more than just payroll, tax resolution, you do other tax resolution. So before we hop off, why don't you tell people how they can find you, contact you? So in case someone watching this is like, oh, I could use some help from her, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. Again, it's Ezra Tax Resolution Specialist. That's EZER. And I do have a website, EzraTaxResolution.com. I am on all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find. Phone number 602-830-3778. Give me a call. I would love to talk to you. We will figure this out.
Yeah, and see, look, I'm friendly, you're friendly, the IRS is not friendly. So
Correct. They are not your pal.
pick your
They are
poison.
not your friend. Do not take their advice.
Yeah. They want those penalties. That's probably a big chunk of their
100%.
budget, right?
Right.
Well, anyways,
Yeah.
I so appreciate you coming on and chatting with me
I
because
appreciate the opportunity.
yeah, As soon as I heard what you did, I was like, that is awesome. This is the why to the piece of what I tell people all the time. So again, Lisa Blue with Ezra Tax Resolution. And of course, if anyone has payroll questions, you can always find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com.